Hello, it is a nice font. Good afternoon. We are back with another fun video to talk about something interesting. And today the topic...
I like that.
You like
that should
that?
be the title of it. A fun video to talk about something interesting.
Yes, and the fun, interesting thing we're talking about today is turning your mind into a freedom machine, which is what Awareness School is all about, which starts 1 week from right now, 1 week from today, 4 o'clock Pacific time on the 29th. We're starting a new 10-week adventure of Awareness School with a lucky group of people. And so today, though, we just want to talk about some of these principles that, you know, it's all about freedom. It's all about being able to do the stuff with your mind that you actually want to do, because most people's minds are, you know, mine included, engineered in a way to create stuckness and misery.
That's
and
right. Stuckness is a recurring theme among people who have messaged recently.
Yes, stuckness, misery. Why do I keep doing the same thing? What's wrong with me? I've done this. I read this book. I understand this. I know this in principle. But in the actual moment-to-moment experience of my life, I feel stuck, I feel sad, I feel like I don't have access to the joy, the happiness, the peace, the freedom, the okayness. That part of me is like, you know, has entertained the idea that it's there, but I can't access it. And really, it's about taking apart machines in your mind and building new ones so that you can access the freedom all of the time, on demand, like when you know the pathway, when you know kind of the engineering of your mind, you know how to get into the back office, you know how to get into the control panel, and you see this is why. It's like it just has to be so clear to you. I know why I'm miserable. I know why I'm in despair. I know why I'm frustrated. I know why
He thinks
I'm
you're
sweating.
miserable.
Oh, do you think
Yeah.
These are my
Support.
emotional support sweethearts.
Hello, darling. Everything's okay.
That's why they're here.
We're speaking hypothetically. It's just
Yes, I'm not actually upset, my darling.
there were quotes around
I
that.
know, there were quotes. You didn't see the quotes. Okay. Well, that's what we're talking about today. And I'm absolutely sweating. It's so
I'm sure
hot
you are.
here.
I'm sure you are. It's rather would you get down, sweetheart? I love you very much. I'm gonna see you in just a
Will you
few
come
minutes,
over here?
okay?
Come on. Come on. Thank you.
Come here.
Thank you.
Come
Thank
here.
you. Okay. Thank you so much.
There. Okay. So,
Go turn
you know,
the air conditioning down.
sometimes if it's 73 degrees in the room, you need a 100-pound blanket to get on you. You know, a heat blanket.
A heat blanket.
All right. So what is it? So what we're pretending to talk about is we're going to pretend that we're talking about turning your mind into a freedom machine. What we're secretly talking about is why you should join Awareness School. Right? That's the
Exactly.
thing.
That's
Actual and ostensible. Yeah. And so the stuckness thing is interesting, and I think we'll probably come back to that maybe a little later. What I was thinking when you were talking, and like the thing that came into my mind as I was listening to what you were saying was like irrigation systems. I don't know if anyone here knows anything about this, but like just kind of the history. I mean, it's a pretty neat concept that you take water that is this kind of naturally occurring thing. It's either rainwater or it's water flowing in a river, and you dig a trench. Maybe you create a canal. Maybe you build a reservoir somewhere. Basically, you take this natural force and you harness it in a way that allows you to do what you want to do. Whether that's you get electricity from it, which is kind of nice, or maybe it's watering things so that you can, you know, grow produce or whatever it is in an area where maybe there wouldn't be enough natural rainfall for it to happen. That's a useful thing. And the other thing about irrigation, I guess maybe probably is a different term for it, but like water can cause a lot of problems. Sometimes a lot of water happens in a place where you don't necessarily want it to, or so much rain falls, or there's a flood or something like that, and it kind of pools around the foundation of your house or something like this, and it creates all kinds of problems. And so, you know, water represents this kind of wonderful opportunity for us to do a whole lot of really wonderful things. At the same time, if there's too much of it in the wrong place, it can be a source of, it could be a disaster. It can destroy the house. It could kill a person. I mean, it could just, you know, cause, I don't know, mold and rot and all this different stuff to happen. And so I was thinking that, you know, mental activity is quite a bit like water, quite a bit like sort of just, there's a naturalness to thinking. There's a naturalness to conceptualizing, building models of reality, all this different stuff. And if you harness it and if you channel it properly, it can allow you to do a lot of really wonderful things, right? I mean, imagine have you ever noticed how effortless thinking is for you? Is it that's how automatically that you just kind of wake up and your mind goes? It's like if you live next to a river. I don't know if we ever lived next to a river. We've stayed places right next to a river.
Next to a train track.
We have, that's true. But if you live next to a river, you wake up in the morning and there it is. There's the sound. You go to sleep to the sound of it. You wake up to the sound of it. Mental activity is kind of that way. Now, you know, wouldn't it be nice if you could, through your mental activity, build little internal systems that would allow you to harness some or all of that mental activity in a kind of systematic and consistent way and direct it towards creating outcomes that you want, while at the same time sort of shunting that mental activity away from the foundation of your psychological house. So, so that it's not washing your garden away, so that it's not causing all kinds of problems in your sense of well-being, so that it's not just ruining all the things that you work really hard to create, whether they're things that are outside. I suspect that the people who are watching here have had thinking ruin a good mood. You've probably had thinking ruin peaceful, happy engagement with productive activity. So you've had your thinking, you're doing what we call doing what will feel good to have done. And let's say you're having a good time doing it, and something in your head says, oh, what you should be doing is this. Or, well, what you should have done first is that. Or, oh, well, it's great that you're doing this, but here's a list of 10 things that you aren't doing that you should be doing. So then you start feeling bad. So then you get sort of distracted. So then you just want to escape feeling bad. So then you kind of go to your phone. So that to me is unharnessed mental activity. Would have been nice to have sort of an aqueduct that would have carried that somewhere that was kind of useful. And that's really what Awareness School is all about. That's what the Everyday Life course is all about. You're doing all this thinking anyway. All this mental activity is occurring. Why not work with it? I mean, a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to silence their mind, and usually that amounts to an internal activity that is very similar to screaming, shut up, shut up, shut up, right? Which is, of course, just more noise in the mind. It's just more thinking. And the best way I found to quiet my mind is to use the noise that my mind is making, to start making good use of the mental activity that's already occurring. And that's pretty much what this is about. So that when you wake up in the morning and your mind is flowing just like the river, your mind's going just like the river flows, the mind immediately begins to think about things that are worth thinking about and that will benefit from being thought about. And it'll think about those things in a way that will tend to produce useful behaviors so that you can just, without any more effort than what you're making right now, start creating kind of results that you'd like to have in your life. And at the same time, create an experience, right? So it's what we call what it's like to be you, how you feel, your mood, your attitude. Create an experience that is at worst neutral and ideally, most of the time, good to great. So that's pretty much what this stuff is about. How exactly a given person goes from having a mental activity they've got and the relationship to that activity that they've got, how do they go from that to kind of what we're describing here?
Aline says she built a mighty fine aqueduct in 7th grade.
There you go. Well done. And you invest a little effort to creating it, and then it's great. And then all the water that goes, it just goes that direction. And it doesn't care. That's one of the things about you've noticed this about water. It doesn't care what direction it goes. Water's not angry about being in a cup, and it's not angry about seeping out of the cup. It's not angry about evaporating. It's not angry about condensing. It just does what the conditions around it sort of make sense for it to do. I think that your mind is sort of the same way. It really is. It's not dead set on thinking negative things that make you miserable. It really isn't. It's more than happy to do that, right? But it's just as pleased to think things that are useful. Once you infuse resourceful thinking with the element of automaticity that unresourceful thinking has for most people, probably has for you right now, the mind is just as happy to think resourceful. This is one of those things. People tend to think that the mind is attached to negativity. It's not. The mind has a preference for that which is easy, effortless, and automatic. Now, if thinking negatively is easy, effortless, and automatic, and if thinking resourcefully is difficult and requires a lot of conscious effort, it's going to prefer the negative. So that's one of those things, is that beginning to recognize what is it about the way my mind currently works that my mind is actually attached to. Does it really want me to be miserable, or does it want me just to feel the way it's used to making me feel?
Yep. And so, when it comes to like the stuckness thing, and we talked about this in the last video we did about like the existential GPS, and it's like, my mind is just used to taking left turns that get me into this cul-de-sac, and then I'm just stuck there, and I feel like I can't get out of it, and there's nothing I can do. But there's always a decisive moment. There's always, if we go back far enough, if we're aware of all of the different choice points that you're making along the way, you can start to see, wow, there was a point where I had a choice. And I didn't recognize it as a choice. That's like the big problem. Why didn't you recognize it as a choice? Because you blacked out, because you were unconscious, because you weren't paying attention, because you were just running mechanical thinking. And so this is really, it is about taking your mind off of the autopilot that it's used to doing, that takes you to the stuckness cul-de-sac where everything's bad and you can't get ahead and you're always feeling torn in a million directions and you're reliving the same patterns and you're seeing the issues your parents had, you're seeing that in yourself, and you're just like, why is my life this way? And you're able to release the resistance first and foremost, which is one of the biggest and most important steps is, can I stop resisting the way that I am? Can I stop like saying I shouldn't be this way, I should be further along, I should be better by now, I should be healed by now, I shouldn't have this problem anymore? There's something like that's really probably your number one issue. If you have an issue, if you're here because there's something, whether you're on my page because you have a health symptom, and that's, you know, what a lot of people, how they end up here is that they have a health symptom and they find out about GNM and they, you know, come into this world and they just want the symptom to be gone, and they're frustrated because the symptom's not gone and they haven't fixed it yet. It's such a problem. And, you know, first thing we have to do is, like, we can't learn from something if we're constantly resisting it. If we're wishing that things were different right now, you are shutting down a part of your brain that could be learning from what's happening, that could be absorbing new understandings about yourself and how you are unconsciously participating in the ongoing nature. That's the thing. In order for a conflict to be like a continual, ongoing, on and off symptom, like, there are tracks, there are things, there are reactions that you have to life. And if you miss it, if you don't know that it's happening, if it's happening unconsciously, it just seems like it's happening to you and you feel cursed and you feel just depressed and frustrated, and here you are dealing with this thing again. And so we have to, at some point, stop resisting it, stop telling ourselves that it should be different, and start really seeing there's something I just haven't seen yet. And when you can really, like, give yourself over to, I just need to see what I haven't seen yet, with like surrendering the grip and the absolute demand that life show it to you, because you can't demand it. It's like, you know, one of the, I think we've given this example at some point, either in Awareness School or somewhere else, just like if you're looking for an animal in the woods, you're trying to like track a certain animal, you can't just demand that it come and show itself to you. It's not going to work. You have to sit and watch for longer than you probably want to. Or if you're hunting or you're trying to see something that you haven't seen yet, you're probably scaring it away by demanding that it be there already. You're probably, you know, energetically, you can't see it when you're in that state. It's like you have to start cultivating a state within yourself that is conducive to seeing something. And so that's really, you know, like awareness. It's just, it's learning how to sit and watch and see things you haven't seen before.
Yeah, that something. Yeah, so there's the desire to see something specific. I want to see what I need to see in order to fix my problem right now. I want to see what I need to see in order to get rid of this bad feeling, right? In order to make this person be different or whatever. You know, okay. But then there's also this desire to see whatever there is to be seen right now. Now, can you see how they're a little bit different? There's the desire to see. If I desire to see something specific, I want to see something that I will believe to be the solution to the problem with which I'm currently preoccupied. There's a sense in which something's kind of embedded in there, which is this resistance or this reluctance to see anything. Not that's not relevant, but that isn't immediately and obviously relevant to me. Now, that's what gets a lot of people in trouble with awareness work, because they think they know what they need to see looks like, and so they preemptively ignore anything that does not conform to what their assumptions about what they need to see will look like will be. And they overlook super important stuff. And so one of the things for us, and I know it's very difficult, you know, if you're dealing with a serious life, if you've got like a serious emotional problem, if you're dealing with a serious relationship issue, if you've got a health problem going on, it makes a lot of sense that you'd be kind of super hyped up about finding, I don't need the key to the library so that I can go learn. I need the key to the car because I need to go to the grocery store because I'm hungry. Like, it makes sense, you know, that you would have sort of a desire to see the answer to the problem with which you're currently dealing. But if you step back a little bit, you might see that your relationship to the situation called having a problem, the solution to which you're looking for, the emotional resistance of not yet having that solution, and your unwillingness to receive information that may be potentially useful but that isn't labeled solution to my current problem. Your unwillingness to see that stuff may be kind of a stumbling block in other areas of your life. And so one of the big things that we do with people is helping them to cultivate, what would you call it? Cultivate a state of ready receptivity so that you have an agenda. Here are my preferences. I want to see things that are going on in my life that will help me address this. But if life wants to reveal to me some other stuff, I'm more than happy to see that stuff first. And I'll keep my eyes open for the thing it is that I'm looking for. But I'm going to pay attention to what's happening. I want to get really good at seeing what is transpiring within me in general. Whether it's flattering, whether it's unflattering, whether it's horrifying to my ego or to my sense of myself, whether it simply contradicts my ideas about who I am or who I should be. I want to see what's transpiring within my mind, within my experience at a given moment in time, whatever it is. And if you can cultivate a desire to see what's going on inside that exists independently of what the specifics of what's going on inside at a given moment in time might be. A lot of people have this thing where they want to see what's going on inside as long as what's going on inside is not more than 7 out of 10 offensive to their ideas of who they are. Or they want to see what's going on inside, except for situations in which they're on the record as, in a fight or in a contentious exchange with a partner or a family member or a friend. Here's what I believe, and here's what's really important, and here's what you did that's wrong, and this is the hill that I'm going to die on. In that situation, they don't want to see what's going on inside, if what's going on inside might in some way compromise their interpersonal position. In my mind, that's a liability to that individual, right? Because that individual has imposed upon themselves conditions, right? Conditions for wanting and being willing to see what's happening inside, conditions upon developing awareness, conditions then upon expanding their capacity for recognizing and then making conscious choice. And so that's a kind of a super useful thing, just that kind of a transition there. Something else you mentioned was like this whole thing about wishing for things to be different. And I think that like wishing for things to be different, again, is like natural. Like there's a lot of things that I want to be different than they are. I've got some kettlebells coming in the mail today, and I want them here rather than on their way here. They're actually late. They got separated from the rest of the order, so I wanted them here 2 days ago. I'm kind of annoyed because I had one, and this is the complimentary repair. And it's like, I wish they were here. But there's a meaningful distinction, I think. And if you pay attention inwardly, like this is not an intellectual exercise. I mean, there is an intellectual component for describing this and modeling it, but really there's a difference in the felt experience, right? Having a preference, I'd like for the carpet to be vacuumed, right? Oh, yeah, that was a nice thing to do. Versus emotionally resisting the fact that at this moment the carpet is covered in dog hair and little, pieces of foxtail and dried grass and little pieces of loose carpet that just come up and you've got dogs that are scratching at it all the time. Distinguish between making a picture of the changes you'd like to see in yourself, in your physical body, in your health, in your finances, in your environment, in your relationship. Distinguish between thinking about what you want and emotionally resisting the discrepancies that exist between your vision of what's desirable and your perception of what is true at a given moment in time. A lot of people have no ability to reliably distinguish between those two things. Most people distinguish between those things some of the time, and a lot of people distinguish between those things most of the time. But a lot of people fail to make that distinction in those moments in which it would be most advantageous for them to do so, right? Which is to say, those moments in which they are conflating wishing for change with emotionally resisting sameness, failing to recognize the fact that they are resisting sameness, creating surplus suffering over sameness, and then labeling that process as I just want things to be different. They don't recognize that that's what they're doing in the moment in which it would serve them best to do it. Most of the things that we teach people to do are things that they already know how to do most of the time. But they don't know how to do those things in those moments in which they don't do them. And it's usually in those moments when they would be best served by doing those things. And so it's about learning to be aware in those moments when everything about your internal programming has set you up to be unaware of what you're doing so that you're able to do things that don't serve you, and then feel bad about having done it without ever quite putting together how you go about making sense out of doing that stuff over and over again, so that you can keep doing it over and over again. Do you want to say anything?
Carry on.
Okay. One of the things that you mentioned was seeing the conscious choice, right? Or recognizing the choices that are available to you. Recognizing that you have a choice is an inherently good feeling experience, right? Seeing that you've got a choice about what you're going to think, about what thoughts you're going to kind of roll with or believe or lean into or feel from, however you want to kind of describe that to yourself. When you're feeling a certain way and you see something that you're doing inside that's kind of helping you feel that way, exacerbating the feeling, perpetuating the feeling, right? And you say, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so I'm feeling kind of bad, and maybe 70% of that bad feeling seems to be related to the situation. But I also just caught myself saying certain things, making certain assumptions, right, about what the situation says about my worth, what the situation says about what's possible, what the situation says about what I can and can't do, what I do and don't deserve. I saw myself saying things that were not particularly resourceful things. And I bet that, if I could probably change what I'm saying to myself, or I could probably change how much I allow myself to believe what I'm saying to myself. And if I change that, I could probably change how I'm feeling at least a little bit, maybe 30% influence over how I'm feeling. There's a choice, right? You've recognized a choice. Now, that is an inherently enriching experience. What it's like to be you gets better instantaneously just because you recognized a choice point that you did not recognize before. You don't even have to make a better choice. You just realize, wait a minute, some of the suffering that I could not figure out how to get out of, I just saw an exit. Here is, imagine that your mind is filled with faucets for suffering that let suffering pour into your experience. If you don't know where those faucets are, and if you don't know how to turn them off, then you've just got suffering pouring in. You've got no idea what to do about it. But if you come across one, you're like, well, listen, there might be a whole lot of other ones. I don't think it's all coming from this one, but I'll tell you something. This internal dialogue, this storytelling, this instance of meaning assignment, this tendency to assume, to burden myself with negative certainty. I know what I can't do. I know I can't get myself to do that. I start for a while, and I don't really do well. I can feel really good for a while, but then the other shoe drop. Negative certainty. You find that faucet, turn it off. Well, great. You've got one less faucet pouring certainty into your mind. Does it matter that there's still, pouring suffering into your mind? Does it matter that there's still other ones? No. You just repeat the process of finding the faucet and turning it off as you move from one place to the next. So it's inherently enriching to see where some aspect of your suffering is coming from, even if you have not as yet prevented that suffering from entering into your experience. Now, some people will say, that's not consistent with what it's been like for me. I see something I could do different, and then I feel bad about the fact that I haven't already done it. I see something I could do different, and I feel bad about the fact that I don't know how to get myself to do anything different. Now, this occurs. This is an example of the kind of thing that we take apart. Really subtle, but extremely important, very profound in its impact on the quality of your experience, mental activity. Do you have the ability to see an opportunity to improve something that you care about without reflexively, unconsciously, automatically, mechanically imposing upon yourself an obligation to have already made the choice the right way? You understand what I'm saying? See yourself talking negative to yourself. Recognize some of your bad feeling might be associated with some of that negative internal dialogue. Can you see that and go, oh, that's great. There's an option for me. If I, moving forward into the future, figure out some kind of way to talk to myself in a different way, not talk to myself at all, respond to that negative internal dialogue in a way that's different, maybe I can create a little bit of a better feeling for myself. Can you do that? Or do you say to yourself, oh my God, all that negative thinking, I've got to fix that. I've known for years about that and how negative it is. My mother's negative too. And I'm never going to get better. And there's just one more thing. You see, when you impose, so you recognize an opportunity, right? This is, you become conscious of a choice, right? You then you recognize an opportunity. That's what a choice is, right? It's an opportunity to make a different choice. But what do you do then? You impose upon yourself an obligation to have already made a different choice, to immediately begin making a different choice, to always make a different choice moving forward. I'm never going to do that again, right? Now, when you impose the obligation on yourself, doesn't it create a sensation inside of deficit? Doesn't it make you feel, I'm not okay, and the way that I can achieve that okayness, or some measure of it, is by always doing this thing right? Does that make sense? Aware of a choice. Choice represents an opportunity. Opportunity then tells you it's time to obligate yourself to have already taken advantage of that opportunity, or henceforth to begin, and you don't know how to do that, by the way. That obligation creates a sensation of deficit, of not okayness. We call this being in the existential red, which is I'm not okay because I'm not making a good choice in this area. I must make a good choice in this area to have even a chance of being okay. As soon as you make a good choice in that area, right, immediately the mind then goes, well, you did that, but you didn't do this. Some of you had this experience growing up with parents, right? Take the trash out. You're in trouble now because you didn't take the trash out. Oh, you took the trash out. That's great, but you didn't say thank you after I did that thing for you. Oh, you said thank you. That's great and all that stuff, but you didn't get an A+ on the test. Oh, you got an A+ on the test, but you got kind of an attitude and you think you're kind of a smart ass. And so this constant thing, and then your mind begins to do it for you, right? And so pay attention to the experience that you create for yourself when you interact with improvement, possibility, options, opportunities, and when you impose obligations on yourself in this way. It's an unpleasant experience. It's a drag. It's not fun. It doesn't feel good. You know what it makes you want to do? It makes you just want to check the boxes so that you can sit down in front of the TV, or so that you can just default into mechanical thinking. Because at least when you're thinking mechanically, you aren't aware of how awful it feels to think in the ways that you do. And so a lot of what we teach people how to do is, listen, here's how you seem to be thinking about the way you are. Here's how you seem to be thinking about prospects for positive change, right? Here's how you react to opportunities, and it usually is imposing obligations on yourself. Let's start changing some of that stuff. Let's practice thinking about how it might be okay that you are the way that you are, and let's practice recognizing opportunities to do things differently. Okay. And then when we start recognizing opportunities to do things differently, oh my God, I'm so nasty. Inside my head, I talk crap about my spouse all day long. Oh my God, I'm so nasty to myself. Oh my God, all I do is think negatively about everything that happens in my life. The smallest things send me on a spiral. Okay, look, you just saw something that you were doing that you didn't know you were doing before. It's called awareness. Excuse me. That means now you're recognizing a choice that you were making without knowing that you were making it. There's an opportunity here. Can you keep yourself from imposing an obligation on yourself that turns that happy, light, uplifting, positively charged awareness of possibility into a burdensome, onerous, tedious, obligatory, unpleasant, heavy, deficit-based need to immediately be other than you are? You see that nasty conversion? There's nasty inversions. There's nasty conversions constantly. This is how this is how your mind functions as what I would call a slavery machine, or an unwanted sameness machine. Right? It knows how to take the experience of seeing how you go about being the way that you are, which is an experience of seeing how you might go about changing if that's what you want to do, and it knows how to turn that into a negative experience of feeling bad about all the good things that you have not yet done. That creates a psychological incentive within you to avoid awareness of opportunities for creating positive change, because you feel worse when you see the opportunity, because the mind immediately transforms it into an obligation that creates a sensation of deficit that puts you in the existential red. It makes you think, shit, this is a pain in the ass. And it makes sense that that's, and so then you put the course in the desk drawer and you don't think about it for 6 months. Makes sense. We have to figure out how to create good feelings inside when we think about doing things that will feel good to have done, and when we do things that will feel good to have done. So a lot of this is just figuring out what kind of an experience you're creating in response to whatever it is that holds your attention. And if that experience is looping you back into unresourceful, unwanted sameness, well, we need to find a way to take that loop and turn it into an arrow that will point in a desirable direction.
Yeah, you did just an amazing job of describing this suffering machine, misery machine, slavery machine, because it goes in a sequence, and there's just a predictable way that you do things. If there is what is your pet emotion? Where do you return to most frequently emotionally? If you're always anxious, if you're always depressed, if you're always frustrated, it's there's a way you get there. And the more curious you are about the stepwise manner, okay, there's a machine that takes me here, that creates this, that manufactures this, that does it without me even thinking. It's so, it's such an expert at doing this. It's taking the time to figure out, how do I do it? And that's, awareness school is just a wonderful fast track, a systematic framework for figuring out how you do it. Annoyed, that's my go-to. It's all right, so how do I get to annoyed? There is a way that I manufacture this. And when I figure it out and when I can see it, I can see all of the exit ramps. I can see all of the different things I can do, all of the alternatives of in order to get to annoyed, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to sequence that all together in a specific way, and boop, here it is. It's a recipe, and so when you figure out how you do it, you'll be able to free yourself from it. You'll be able to notice. And that's the thing. At first, you don't even free yourself from it. At first, you just watch yourself do it. Let me see how I do it. How do I make this? I'm in the midst of making some fresh sourdough bread. And it's like, I have to do it in a certain way. There are steps that need to take place in order for me to end up with a wonderful loaf of sourdough bread. And there's a way that I know, Aline, we're very excited to see you there. I saw that you joined. And yeah, so it's like, you'll figure it out. And once you see, oh, this is how I cook it up, this is how I make it, this is how I bake it, because you're in awareness, you're no longer kind of like in the flow, just kind of being processed by the machine. You're stepping aside from the machine and seeing, oh, this is how she cooks it up. She ferments gets the starter, and then she feeds the starter, and the starter does this, and and now, she has a lovely loaf of anxiety, a lovely loaf of being annoyed. And when you do that, it becomes interesting and fun. It becomes lighthearted and like something that's work withable, because your stuff seems terrible to you. Like your own story feels so awful and unwork withable. But when you can just come with a lighthearted I can work with this. There is, nobody. Your problems are not unique. Your problems are not interesting. Like when you figure out how to fix them, and then you can get on to the interesting stuff in life.
Yeah, not perversely interesting. Yeah. Oh, but that's okay. So annoyed. I felt personally attacked by that. She's talking about me. She's annoyed with me. See, that's a really good example about how to use your mind in ways that don't work. One of the things. Okay, so here's just a little tip, because unfortunately, many of the people who are watching this video may not enroll in awareness school. So one of the things we want to do is give some real tips about this stuff. We find the more good quality information we give away, the more people want to do the work, and it also just kind of is fun to explain this stuff. So usually when a person has something feeling like like annoyance, right? They're either just kind of whole hog leaning into it, kind of like they always do, right? They're experiencing it as an inevitable aspect of their reality, of their experience, of what it's like to be driving, of what it's like to interact with their spouse, of what it's like to deal with stupid people, or whatever. That's one option. Or they start to kind of become aware of the fact that it's something that they're doing. They're aware of the annoyance in a different way than they normally are. We'll say they're aware of the annoyance in a personal, growthy kind of way. Usually they immediately begin to resist it. They immediately begin to kind of try to force a fix on it, to finagle it, to, you know what I mean? Say like this, begin to interface with it. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but usually when you're annoyed and you start to try to do personal growth work on yourself, the feeling of annoyance increases. It's like throwing water on a grease fire. It's not a good idea. It doesn't, or an electrical fire. It's not a wise thing to do. And so one of the things that I would suggest just in general is and this is really just about programming yourself, calibrating yourself to have an utterly different attitude when you approach a feeling that you don't want to feel, or an internal process, negativity, and whatever it is, storytelling, whatever's going on in your head. When you approach it, an extremely, what would you call it, conscientious and respectful attitude as you approach some aspect of yourself that you regard as undesirable or unwanted. Notice the completion and the quality and, in many ways, the perfection of the annoyance. It's beautifully made annoyance. It's not a bad impression of annoyance. It is exactly what it is. It's not pretending to be annoyed. It's real. I mean, if it's depression, if it's misery, look at it and say, this is, kick the side of it and go, this is well made. I mean, this is serious. This is robust. Where was this depression made? Because this is solid stuff here. This isn't any kind of flimsy imitation. This is the real deal. And just appreciate how perfectly every feeling is what it is. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's stupid. And, it is kind of stupid. But it also tends to forestall a lot of unresourceful reflexive engagement that the mind can be sort of roped into doing when it begins to attempt to do work on itself. So we don't need stuff to be sophisticated, smart, spiritual, or any of that. We just need it to work. We don't even need it to be positive. We just need it to work. So before you do anything on a feeling, stop and just take a moment and say, this is high quality pissed off. This is 100%. This is 100 proof pissed off, right? There's no question. This anger is beautifully made. Excellent, right? So you do that. And then the next thing is just observe it. And I'm telling you, it sounds so simple. I guarantee you don't know how to do this. I very rarely make kind of presumptuous statements like that, but I'm comfortable in this. I'm not comfortable doing it, but I'm going to do it because I know it's true. You don't know how to observe things that are going on inside your head that you deem to be undesirable or worthy of change without reflexively reacting to it in a meddlesome way that tends to perpetuate or exacerbate the feeling. And here's kind of just a little story, a little anecdote that kind of relates to this. I was reading a book, and I think it was about likability. Some of you may be surprised I've ever read a book about likability, just based on the feelings that you're having about me right now. But see, just in case someone was thinking that, I wanted to put that out there. They go, it's called pacing. That's about likability. That's one of the things that you do is if you want people to like you, tell them all the things that you're doing to make them like you. People love it. But I think it was by an FBI guy or a CIA guy or someone. And it was basically his job was, okay, this guy over here, he works for, I think it was probably the Soviet Union. He basically, it was back during the Cold War. And he's like somebody who's a representative of that country. And we want to kind of bring him over to our side. We want him to be a spy. We want him to do work for us. And so, that's a pretty delicate thing. Like you don't want to come right out and say, hey, Dimitri, we want you to betray your government and work for the United States. It doesn't work. And so this guy had this approach, and it was extraordinarily conservative and delicate, right? And in the beginning, he found out the path the guy would take when he was going to his embassy, and he would sit down at a cafe along that path and be reading a newspaper. And he did that for like a couple of weeks, sat there, didn't look at the guy, didn't make eye contact with the guy, just sat there and read his newspaper, let the guy see him, right? And then I think maybe the next week, he started kind of glancing at the guy really casually. After several weeks, he'd been glancing at the guy really casually, right? And at some point, they made eye contact, and I think he did a nod. And then he made it so instead of sitting at the cafe, he was kind of walking down the street. And then, they'd see each other in a more kind of confrontational way, and he'd do a hello, or he'd do a nod, and then maybe got to where he did a hello. And then he it was in this extremely gradual, stepwise, boiled the frog so slowly it doesn't even know what's happening to it. And it took a lot longer, but he eventually brought the guy over. And so what he was doing was building familiarity. He was getting this guy to be accustomed with seeing this person. The guy's guard is not up and all this different. I'm telling you something, when you see what you deem to be unresourceful inside your head and you walk up to it like this, it goes, oh shit, watch out. Here come the change police. Okay, so we got to throw them off our track. You know what I'm saying? You come blustering up like you think you're undercover or slick or smooth. You're not. The thing you want to change sees you coming from a mile away, and it's got a million ways to throw you off. And that's why this awareness work is so powerful, and why we suggest to people, listen, you've been doing this stuff for years. What's your hurry? Stop trying to, when you attempt to make change happen faster than it can happen, right? You make it take longer than it needs to. You make it take longer than it has to. When you try to force it to be faster than it can be, you make it less fast than it could be. And so spend time recognizing the pattern and seeing that the pattern doesn't serve you. Oh, there's the feeling. And it feels like doing nothing. Don't you think it felt like doing nothing just to sit at the cafe with your newspaper and let yourself maybe be seen by the guy you want to convert? Didn't that probably feel silly? This guy's got to get up and leave his wife and his children and all this different, you know what I'm saying? And he's got to go to this cafe and pretend to read this newspaper, and he's not talking to the guy, he's not converting the guy, he's not pressuring the guy, he's not even looking at the guy. He's not even guaranteed that the guy is going to see him, and if the guy sees him, he's not guaranteed the guy's going to notice him. And if he notices him, he's not guaranteed that the guy's going to like the way he looks. He's just putting himself out there to allow for the possibility of this guy that he wants to begin to influence, for that guy to see him and become familiar with him. Let your problems become familiar with your awareness of them, is what I'm saying to you. Put yourself around, right? Be in the area to be seen by that problem so that it can become familiar with being seen by you without the meddlesome correction. Have you not as a child, have a little compassion for your problems, in other words, have you not as a child learned, or did you not as a child learn to feel very uncomfortable under the scrutiny of an adult because you had put together that usually following that scrutiny is a correction of some kind, or is a criticism, or is a rebuke, or something like that, so you learn to not want to be watched? Well, don't you think that's how your problems feel about you? And you call them problems, but they're just internal processes. The problem doesn't think of itself as a problem. The problem is just kind of punching the clock. It's just a 9 to 5 kind of thing. And now here you come. And so it starts getting nervous, and it starts getting weird, and it starts getting evasive, and it starts getting squirrely, and it does all this different stuff to throw you off the path. And you don't notice, you don't put yourself in the problem's position. And so you never think about how the problem perceives you because you spend so much time perceiving the problem, right? You never become familiar with it. You don't learn how to interact with it in ways that work. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about your problem, feeling about your and it's right to think that, because most people, as soon as they see themselves doing something that doesn't serve them, wham! And it's nothing gentle about it. It's just, oh yeah, you know what? There's something wrong with your back right here, so we're going to strap you in this torture chair, and it's going to stretch you. It's going to take 45 years of bad posture, and we're going to force you into a good posture in 45 seconds. That doesn't work. That does tremendous damage. If you really want to reshape things that have been in one position for a long time and therefore kind of developed an amount of rigidity, you have to kind of take time. Gradual, light touch stimulus. You want to build trust before you attempt to influence, right? You do that with people. You do that with your children, right? You do it with yourself and with your problems. Show yourself that you're nothing to be afraid of. Show yourself that improvement is nothing to be afraid of. Show yourself that awareness of self is not something that you have to be afraid of. It's not going to lead to shame. It's not going to lead to guilt. It's not going to lead to self-flagellation. It's not going to lead to emotional resistance. It's not going to create any kind of psychological problem. It's never going to make what it's like to be you worse. The worst thing it'll ever do is have no impact on your experience whatsoever. So it'll be a neutral influence. Worst case, it's actually worst case, it's a neutral emotional experience with a positive information gathering component. I'm learning without suffering any more than I was before. Teach yourself to feel comfortable with the presence of your personal growth self. Teach yourself to, there's nothing more. You ever around a personal growth person who thinks they know just what you need to hear? Don't you cringe? Isn't it awful to be around them? Because and isn't it what's most offensive? It's not even what they say and do. It is the oppressive certainty that they have, that they know just what you need, and they know it so clearly that they don't have to show you any respect in how they communicate to you about it. All that goes out the window, right? Because they know. And so then they can just boss you around and tell you what to do and all of it. And it's not even like offensive that they're right. It's offensive that they've never even considered the possibility that perhaps they're incorrect, or that you have a right to say, oh, no, thank you, even if they're right about what they're saying. That's the attitude that people take towards themselves, which is why they get so much resistance and pushback from themselves. They don't really cultivate it. You don't, and this is that thing too. If you want to change yourself without building a new relationship with yourself, there's something wrong with you. Let's say it this way. There's something wrong with your approach to yourself. There's something, domineering. There's something unfeeling. There's something callous. There's something alienated and alienating about it. And I would say in a situation like that, if that's me, I'm not competent to do work on myself. Mm-hmm. And so therefore myself is right in saying, look here, buddy, go figure out some things yourself and then come back and talk to me, right? Because, unconscious mechanical activity can be nasty. It can create a problem. But there's something really awful and nasty about busting into the room and immediately taking everybody to task without first looking to see what's going on with you. And that's what the personal growth part of us tends to do. So just be aware and let the awareness just sort of vibe next to the sameness. And don't do this thing. So there's the sameness, what we call the mechanical pattern. Just interjecting.
No, you're good.
There's the sameness, there's the mechanical pattern, there's my awareness of it, right? Now, my mind looks at that and it says, okay, there's the sameness. And it goes, okay, there's the awareness. And it goes, but the sameness is still samenessing. I'm trying awareness, but I'm still getting moody with my spouse. I'm still getting jealous. I'm still overeating. I'm still failing to exercise. See, it's not working. It isn't working, right? What the mind means by that is it wasn't instantaneous. It didn't work in the amount of time that I assumed that it would work. Therefore, out the window, it's over. And I'll never have to try this again. What's the next strategy? What's the next technique? What next course can I take, right? When I was little, I had an action figure, and I think it was a Terminator, like T-800 skeleton. I don't know if you guys remember, like the classic Terminator thing. And I went through this phase where I like to put action figures in a glass of water and then freeze it. And then take it out and see the action figure, like, I don't know, cryo chambers and, little kids, like watching cartoons and Star Wars and stuff like that. And so that's a lot of fun. And so then you take it out, but then you want to play with the action figure. And it's like, well, okay, but it's frozen. And so you got to let it sit for a certain amount of time so that the edges of that frozen water, right, will kind of loosen enough that it shakes loose from the glass. Okay, then you take it out, and then you got this nice block of ice that sits there. And now it's going to take quite a bit of time for that to melt away. That's the problem. Yeah, the change that you want is inside there, and the awareness is going through a process of kind of melting that, but it does take a period of time. What you don't want to do is get frustrated and throw the whole thing back in the freezer, go unconscious. It's not working. I mean, imagine thinking that heat doesn't melt ice because it doesn't melt it instantaneously, and then you put it back in the freezer, and then after you put it back in the freezer, you come back 12 days later and say, aha, it still hasn't worked. And it's like, well, you took the heat away. You removed the awareness. And so creating that sense of safety, people talk about safety, vulnerability, and stuff like that. And I kind of have an aversion to those terms because my nonsense detector goes off with regard to a lot of what comes after they bring those words up. You know what I mean? But there is, I mean, just a matter of fact, no nonsense understanding of that the emotional safety is just, you look inside, you see something's amiss, something's other than ideal, right? Ooh, I'm thinking this. That seems pretty nasty and likely to be productive of unwanted emotional and behavioral consequences. Oh, and you don't impose upon yourself any surplus emotional suffering. That's how I think about it. Not being a jerk. That's sort of what it is to myself. Not doing what doesn't work. Not ladening. As you become more aware, it gets to be obvious to you that that's what being nasty to yourself in response to an insight consists of. But when that stuff goes on outside of awareness, all you feel is the consequences of being nasty to yourself. So it feels like being a child who's getting in trouble with or is disappointed or been sort of disapproved of by a parent. You don't see the activity that's going on in your mind. And so as far as you're concerned, that activity is not happening. All there is the bad feeling that occurs as a consequence of, downstream from that activity. As you sort of, there's a couple things you can do. You can expand awareness. You can also move awareness around. I like to do both. I mean, it's sort of like if you were trying to prevent rain from touching the ground, you'd want to grow the size of your umbrella, and you'd also want to move your umbrella around some, right? If you wanted to, let's say, search for something in the woods, you'd want your flashlight to be bigger, right, more powerful, and you'd also want to kind of aim it around in different areas to see what there is to see. We do both of those things in awareness school. The idea, though, is that you're going to bring more of your mental activity into awareness so that you will see it and recognize it for what it is. And, super importantly, recognize the consequences of your mental activity. So as I see the consequences of your mental activity and recognize them for what they are, those bad feelings, that lack of motivation, that feeling of aversion to engage with things that are worth doing, or that aversion to invite an insight about something that you might be up to. You begin to see what all that stuff is made out of, see how it is that you do it. Then it becomes an option to change it. And as a part of that whole process, you form a new, healthy, more literally intimate relationship with yourself that's one of sort of friendly companionship rather than a sort of adversarial punishment, which is very nice.
Very nice. Sounds like Adrienne is finding some success. She used to be the me up until recently. I think the forcing the change or not just allowing it, and now telling herself, I get to hone these skills for the rest of my life. And it's exciting instead of daunting. Yeah. Instead of putting the pressure on yourself to have already been different, it's like, I'm here anyways. I could either be here, let myself learn as much as possible, and I know that that's the thing, is like, that's the way out, the chill way, the observant way, the curious way, and just paying more attention without the pressure, because the pressure is part of the stuckness. Pressure puts you back on the stuckness highway. It's part of the stuckness machine. It's part of the misery and the slavery machine is demanding that you be different already. And it's like, now that you know that doesn't work, literally just try something different. What if I just let myself get a little better at this today? What if I just, and that's the thing, like, even if it's at something you're like, oh no, but I need this to be better now. Again, that pressure, that need for it to be better now is part of why it's not better now. And if you can notice, and get curious about, maybe that's true. I know it doesn't feel true. I know that there's a part of you that equates the pressure to fix something with the will to fix it. And if I don't have the will to fix it, it won't ever get fixed. But just observe how much that hasn't worked. Just observe how stuck you still are, despite how much pressure and will you've kind of put into, I got to make this change. And the more that you see that this this is not a recipe for getting out of this. This is a recipe apparently for staying stuck in it, even though somehow along the way I've conflated it, I've confused it. People I grew up around said that if you don't worry about something, if you don't put a ton of pressure on yourself, you're not going to get the outcome you want. And so you just kind of learn, and it's one of these unspoken assumptions that you need to become aware of. Again, we just need to illuminate all of these things. It's like, okay, how could a person keep doing something that doesn't work again and again and again, despite getting the same result? There's an assumption. They are assuming that they need to put this pressure on themselves in order to get an outcome. And they're not realizing that the thing that they're assuming they have to do in order to change is actually part of the stuckness machine. And it's like, when you can see it and laugh at it and go, oh boy, rather than, oh no, this just goes to show that I'm never going to get anywhere because I've been doing something that doesn't work and I haven't seen it. If that's what your mind does, right? This is the big concept of grabbing the principle, these ideas, by the blade, which hurts you, instead of the handle, which helps you. This is what people do with GNM all the time, is they say, oh no, now I'm worse off because I know about this, and I'm hyper aware of all these, and it's only getting worse, and I'm only more anxious and panicked and worried. It's like, it's not the information, it's how your default patterns are inclined to engage with the information. You grab it by the blade and you get poked and it hurts because of the way that you're engaged. And awareness helps you to see, I'm grabbing this by the blade, because if new information hurts or makes you feel bad, there's something, new information, this should be helpful to you, like learning GNM, it should be helpful to you. If it's not, if it's causing you more distress, you have to start looking at the mental patterns, right? We have to go up a level. Like, that's how this work is so very beneficial for applying whatever you want to apply, whether it's understanding the biological laws or anything else. If you have this habit, this unconscious pattern of taking new information and bludgeoning yourself with it, hurting yourself with it, if it's painful to come across new things that you haven't known already, it's because of an unconscious misery machine. And when you can see it, you can do something different about it.
Yeah. A fleck of dust in your eye hurts your eye more than does a fork sitting on the table, right? But if you take that fork, imagine a situation in which a person, without thinking about what they were doing or realizing what they were doing, they took a fork and they just would jam it in their eyeball. And then imagine if that person had their understanding of reality was such that the pain in their eye was caused by the fork and not by what was done with it. And that's the situation for a lot of people with information, because the manner in which they interact with information occurs outside of awareness. And so as far as they're concerned, it's not happening. There's just an isness to it. That when I do something outside of awareness, I'm not aware of the fact that I'm doing it. And so I tend also not to be aware of the fact that there are alternative ways of doing it. And so then I tend to be not very sensitive to the possibilities of different experience that would accompany my doing something differently at that level of my being, right? At that level of my activity. One of the things that mentioned was willpower. So will, like force of will, tends to be useful kind of in proportion to how much clarity you have with the outcome that is desired and the actions that are required. So when you're super clear on outcome that's desired and actions required to get to the desired outcome, then will becomes very useful. The more there is ambiguity, right? The more either of those areas, what do I want? How do I get what do I want? The less likely applications of just sheer will are to be productive. At that point, awareness, information gathering, curiosity, openness, things like that are more likely to be useful kind of at that stage. There are decisive moments in every process, whether it's a marathon or starting a business or, honestly, getting through a fight with your partner. There are moments in which willpower comes in handy and is useful and in many cases even necessary. But a lot of people, they lack awareness or they lack the information that awareness would have provided them. And they attempt to compensate for that lack with just sheer willpower. Now, this is a person who is exhausted. This is a person who is stuck. This is a person, say, for whom nothing works or for whom things work for a while, but then they stop working, right? Because, and this is this thing too, you can force your way to you can gain positive change ground by sheer force of will, right? But it's not sustainable in that you cannot continue to gain that ground. You can't even maintain the ground that you, and this is this thing, if you're really into building a positive change empire within yourself and expanding it out, you expand it out a little bit, you stop expanding, you consolidate. And the only way to really consolidate the gains that you create as a result of interacting with yourself is by becoming sufficiently aware of the structure of both desirable and undesirable thoughts, feelings, and actions, right? Know the strategies for both of the things. That's super useful. That's that's a concept that many people, they have this rapacious desire to extend the extent of their personal change empire overnight. And it's like, well, you might be able to do that, but you've got no control over your different provinces. And you're going to have uprisings. The first time stress happens, the whole thing's going to fall apart, and then you're going to despair. So that's
a good question. And actually, I was just chatting with someone about this the other day. Is awareness school sprung from German New Medicine? Actually, awareness school comes before I came across German New Medicine. So this is something that kind of in our journey of, because we are both chiropractors, and we kind of were in that world of behavior modification and lifestyle health, and change what you eat and change your products that you're using and get toxins out of your life. And so it was very focused on like behavior changes, external behavior changes was like what my practice was all about, and teaching people how to be healthy and how to make these changes. And after several years of practicing in that way, I started, well, one, it was mostly for myself within like our relationship dynamic, seeing that I was the healthiest person. If you watched me all day long, you'd see me wake up early and exercise and eat perfect foods and do all these wonderful things, but inside it was a big mess. And every Sunday night I had anxiety, and I would cause fights unconsciously, automatically with Steve. And it was just like, there was a lot going on that wasn't being addressed by this really wonderful, super duper healthy lifestyle that I was living. And so, we both got into some work, meditation, awareness work, paying attention. And I just started saying, ooh, I have a lot. There was a lot there. When I started doing this, I was extremely unconscious of all of these patterns, and I felt, like, this is just me, this is just the way it is, this is just the way I am, I'm just gonna be this way. Like, I had totally accepted that the personality problems I had were an unchangeable aspect of me in the past that I had. I was like, this is my past. What do you mean? This is how anybody would think about this thing. And so he started getting into the work, I started getting into this work, and then, Steve developed this course to help people to understand the stuff going on behind the scenes, the stuff we can't see. Because if we followed you around all day, you probably do so much, so many healthy activities, you engage in so much healthy stuff, but when we see that the big pivotal, most important thing that you're doing, we can't, for yourself, is what's happening in the invisible realm that nobody can see, but it's going on for you constantly all the time. And so that, began to be what we wanted to do with people. We created this course. We started kind of inviting people into understand your perception, understand how you're thinking and feeling and why you do the things you do. So that came first. And then I stumbled across German New Medicine, and I was like, whoa, this is fast. Because I had a sense that there was a connection between the work that we were doing, because I just knew that this was absolutely essential. The external stuff, the nutrition, the exercise, getting adjusted, all of the physical health things were great, but they weren't a complete system. There was a big piece that was missing, because you see people come into your office enough to get adjusted and to do these healthy things, but they're still having problems with their spouse, they're still having the same issues, and you're like, there's something I'm not able to address. This work began to be able to address those things. Then I came across GNM, and I was like, whoa, okay, so your perception and your experience is perpetuating these unresolved conflicts in your life. And so that's kind of the order that it went in. And so that's where awareness sits above, it sits beyond, we recognize this wonderful system of the 5 biological laws and how that can help us. But the awareness really is, awareness is above all of it. Awareness sees, how can I engage with this system? I can engage with it in a way that works, or a way that doesn't work, a way that helps me, or a way that harms me and causes me more distress and suffering, and so this is, and then sometimes people will ask, well, do you teach GNM in awareness school? No, because the awareness school is about like a pattern recognition. GNM is like the content of how biology functions. This is for you to recognize patterns within yourself of how you engage. For example, with the model of GNM, how do you engage? How do you think about, your problems that are causing you to continually be in a state of unresolved conflict or stepping on tracks? And so you'll see how this can help you with literally anything and everything. And if you're trying to learn GNM, if you're trying to understand your own conflicts, this will help you tremendously with that, because you'll be able to see and start to recognize pattern, rather than getting stuck in content. So content's like, your specific thing, but when you can zoom out and see the pattern, it becomes so much easier to work with it.
Yeah. Should I say something about awareness school and GNM?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So here's kind of how I think about this situation. Let's assume that the things described in German New Medicine are 100% accurate, so that everything that's in it's accurate, and that everything that needs to be in it is in it, right? So it's a model that is complete. It is describing a biological reality that exists outside of a human being's awareness or understanding of it. Does that make sense? So that these are the laws along which human biology proceeds, and not just human biology, but we'll talk in this instance. So it is a description of the phenomenology of what people call illness and disease. Like that way that it happened existed before the description of it existed. And so there is the thing that GNM is describing, and then there is the model of German New Medicine that a person builds inside their mind when they learn about it. If you think about it, animals were never supposed to have this kind of understanding of themselves. Now, I'm using that language loosely there. It's throughout the history of biological organisms. I don't think deer are out there saying to themselves, gee whiz, I think I've got a separation conflict. What does that mean? Oh my, was it this or is it that? Do I miss my baby, or do I miss the woods? And so problems often will arise at the model level. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with GNM. That was the whole purpose of my the fork in the dust earlier, where grab the tool by the handle, not the blade. People have we'll call them dysfunctions. People have other than optimal tendencies that govern their interactions with information that pre-exist their finding out about GNM. They're a little neurotic. They're a little kind of a sort of hypochondriac. Right now, GNM probably provides examples. It's a constellation. It's a conflict about this, that, the other thing. That's probably true, and it still is happening, and it still affects their ability to interface with the model GNM in a way that's maximally useful. A lot of what we do, a lot of what I do, and I think probably a lot of what you do, when it comes to the awareness school specific stuff, is teaching a person how to deal with what's in here. And what's in here is knowledge about GNM and tendencies to use that knowledge against themselves. Both of those things are in there. Now, some people are just nasty, but some people have criticized, I think they've criticized our work with regard to GNM and saying, oh, it's just a bunch of psychoanalysis crap. It's a bunch of talk therapy stuff. First of all, I'm not saying, well, let's sit down on the couch and talk about how you feel and that's going to resolve your conflict. That's not true. I don't think anyone who spent any amount of time looking at what we do and given it really an effort to figure it out believes that that's true or has a reasonable basis to believe that that's true. What does GNM say? GNM says, here is the relationship between this biological process, right? This adaptation process, right? And the sort of psychic impacts, like the conflicts that occurred. Here are the relationships here. You can kind of infer from what's going on what kind of an issue that you had. This is an indigestible morsel. This is a separation conflict. It's on this side, so it's associated with your spouse, or it's associated with your parent or your mother, mother, child, whatever. Like, it tells you that stuff. And then, okay, the person now has to figure out what they're going to do about it. Are they going to separate from these people? Are they going to reunite with them? Are they going to do whatever? And listen, it's not even just this. How are they going to feel about taking the steps they have to take in order to do this stuff? Listen, I can't talk to you anymore. It's making me sick. Or you know what I'm saying? Like there are these real, because isn't the GNM perspective is that the best solution is a biological solution, meaning that let's say that you're very upset because for some reason or other, I don't know, maybe your child passed away, right? If you're a young mother, especially, best thing that you can do is have another child. That's just the sort of biological way to do that, right? I don't know if you've ever talked to a mother that's in a situation like that, but she often benefits from some assistance and thinking about the fact that that's the best solution, so that she doesn't have to feel like in order to move towards this child, she's leaving this child behind, so on and so forth. And so it's about, okay, listen, here's what GNM says that you need to do. Now let's talk about how to make you feel at a minimum okay, and ideally enthusiastic about the fact that you're doing that. Using the mind in a way that works. Tell me what happens when you think about doing what makes sense based on this model. Is there guilt? Is there resistance? Is there reluctance? All right, listen, describe to me exactly what your reluctance is. All right, what I'm hearing, and you're describing you don't want to move on because you feel like if you move on, you're betraying that person. Okay, what I'm hearing there is the echo of an assumption, and the assumption says that when you leave behind the grief, you're leaving behind the memory of the person, the loss of which the grief is associated with. Maybe that's not totally true. What do you think about that? See, and so then we begin guiding a person in that direction. And so that's kind of how this stuff interfaces with GNM. It's not a replacement for it. It's not a derivation of it. We leave German New Medicine totally intact. As far as I can tell, there's nothing about it that needs to be changed. This is an elucidation. I mean, if you just say, like, if GNM tells you what you need to do, we're kind of, well, okay, here's how you do it. That's kind of like where we come in. That's the perspective that we have. I don't think that, now I would say, like, my personal experience of awareness work with GNM is that it's kind of like the Venn diagram, or like the awareness work, the mindset stuff, the positive psychology, whatever you want to call it's over here. And there is a certain kind of biological reality that is going on outside of my awareness. And I kind of want it that way, to be honest with you. I don't want to know what my colon's doing 24 hours a day. I'm fine. Just take care of business. I trust you. Do you know what I'm saying? A healthy amount of delegation is good. But there is an overlap area. And there have been many moments in which I think I have sensed the reality of a program, or I have sensed the reality of a resolution occur with, oh, that's what it's like to have the resolution happen. Oh, there it is. Oh, wait a minute. Is that what it's like to be conflicted? I mean, we've told many stories about this where, like, if you would have asked me, did you have a conflict? Because I can even just think about the word conflict has a certain connotation for everyone, right? Everybody, the word conflict means something to them. And my personal experience suggests that the biological conflict encompasses far more than does what the person's understanding of what would constitute a conflict encompasses. Your idea of a conflict is, I was consciously 7 or more out of 10 angry about this specific thing at a given moment in time. My experience is that a biological conflict can occur when I have absolutely no idea that it's even happening. But I can catch it after the fact if I'm aware of, oh, here I am, I'm sneezing. Oh, here I am, I've got a nosebleed. Oh, what was just going on here? And I had one, I don't know if I get the whole story, but, like, should I tell the tongue scraper story?
Oh, you can, sure.
Okay, so this is a stupid example, but stupid examples are the best examples because they really just they just indicate kind of how this stuff works. So like 2012, we got these metallic tongue scrapers, and it was revolutionary for me. So I'm really into oral hygiene. It's one of my top 5 hobbies. I mean, I just like it a lot. Like, I've always liked a good toothbrush. I've always been kind of a floss fanatic. It's just something I do. And we got these tongue scrapers, and it's metal, so you use it, you rinse it off. It's like it's not like something that is going to wear out necessarily, or that you have to throw away. It's not like underwear. I mean, it's something that you use for years. And so I guess about 2 years ago, I went to use it. And this is like in the morning, I'm out of it. Like, I am totally out of touch with reality in the morning. I'm going through the motions. I don't know who I am for the first 15 or 20 minutes. So I'm in there, and the very first thing I do is I do my tongue scraping. So I pick it up, and I start to do it, and it just breaks in half. And I was so startled by it that I actually went, wah! Because this isn't, I mean, I know it's stupid, but yeah, if you know me, it makes more sense. Stupid things don't seem so strange, They still seem stupid, but they seem more par for the course if you know me. And I was really taken aback, partly because oral hygiene is a big deal to me, partly because I've had this thing forever. And I grow attached to tools that serve me very well, I will admit that. And partly because, look, I'm just bleary. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I probably would have known that the tongue scraper bursting is not a big deal. 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm a little bit less in touch with the part of me that knows I can just go to Whole Foods and get a different one. So that happens, I go, right? And I think pretty much I just went on with my day. I took it out and I tossed it down on the counter. And my intention was to tell Melissa about this awful thing that happened to me, but we kind of got caught up in the course of the day. And at some point in that afternoon, I'd had a bunch of sneezes, like crazy sneezes. And I believe I got a nosebleed. I think there was a nosebleed that happened. And we were standing at the counter, and so Melissa always gets into G&M mode, right? She goes, okay, well, what was the conflict? And I'm like, give me a break. I didn't have a conflict. I think I just got some dust in my nose. I was playing with the dogs or something like that. And I'm going like this. I'm saying to her, yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think about it, but I can't. And as I'm talking about this, and I'm saying, I don't know what it could have been, all this, literally in my hand is the broken tongue scraper. And it was one of the most powerful instances of, you call it unconscious or subconscious or whatever. Some part of me knew what was going on. But the part of me that I call me and the part of me that's up front doing the PR, the part that's talking to you right now and the interfacing out here, that part didn't know. But some part did know. And it was saying, hey, you idiot, it's right here, stupid. This is what it was. This is what you were upset about. And it was a really strange moment. And I looked at it and I said, oh my God, that's it. And that's a little bit of like what awareness work in general is like, is that you say to yourself, I don't know how I'm creating this feeling. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know. I don't know where my pen is. I don't know where it is. It's like that. And then basically you, through awareness, you go, look at your hand. And you say, oh, there it is. And it's sort of like, it begins to change your understanding of what the definition of I know and I don't know is. So the part of me with which I am identified, the part of me with which I am in touch at this moment, does not know, is not admitting that it knows. Does some other part of me know? Perhaps, right? So I know for certain that the mind is segmented, or that there are depths to it, or that there are departments to it, or something like that. And so it seems entirely conceivable to me that if a knowing can exist in a part of my brain or mind that I'm not in touch with, right? Then surely a knowing could probably exist in a part of my body. I mean, my nose knew that I was conflicted. I mean, it had a knowing in a sense, but the executive up here, the ego or whatever you want to call it, it didn't. But the transmission was made. The body was screaming, and the body said, no, here it is. And the nose said to the arm, pick it up, stupid. Pick it up and show it to him. Show it to her. Maybe she'll be paying attention. He's not listening. And so that was one of the more profound instances for me. Now, at so many levels it was profound. Now, does it make rational sense that I would have had a this stinks conflict in response to that? I'm in my 30s. Money's not like a huge issue for me at this point. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not strapped.
Buy another one.
That's right. I could buy quite a few of them. And I'll tell you something, I've even contemplated getting a nicer one at various points. These like copper ones and stuff like that. So there's so many levels at which it doesn't make intellectual sense to me that I would have had that conflict, and yet the conflict occurred. But doing the awareness work, I think, put me in a position to recognize, hang on, there's more than one me, or there's more than one. The part that's doing the talking here isn't all of me that exists. Mm-hmm. The part that, and this is another thing too, a lot of people do kind of what you might call like a gatekeeping. So if how they feel doesn't make intellectual sense to them, their mind will translate that into, I don't feel that way. Mm. And that's a big problem for a lot of people. And as you can become a little bit more aware, you can begin to, you begin to become more comfortable feeling things when it doesn't make sense to the intellectual part of you that you would feel that way. You begin to become comfortable knowing things, even when you don't know how you know, right? It's basically like you're allowed to feel things that your conscious model of reality doesn't say you should feel, or doesn't say that you get to feel. And you're allowed to know things that your conscious model of reality cannot explain you knowing. Now, that doesn't mean that you just devolve into mysticism. It just means that you say to yourself, I know this. I don't know how I know. I think I know this. I'm totally unsure about how I know this, but I'm going to go ahead and proceed on the knowing, and then I'm going to wait for information about how it is exactly I came to know this thing. Now we've got a person that's in kind of cooperation, so that what you want is, you want, like in a corporation, if the janitor has $1 million idea, right? A healthy, well-functioning corporation is one in which that idea can make its way up to the CEO's office. You understand what I'm saying? But if there's so many hierarchical structures in place that the good idea that the janitor has, or that the secretary in the lobby has, is incapable of percolating up to the janitor, or to the CEO, that's not a healthy functioning corporation. It's going to lose money. It might not make it. And for me, it's like G&M and awareness school. What is this about? I want to turn myself into a very healthy biological corporation, so that if my intestines have a certain something going on, right, and it's got an idea about something that needs to be different, that idea will work its way up. and it's not, my mind shuts it down and says, I'm not immediately aware of any reason that I would have an indigestible morsel conflict about this specific thing or about anything, so I'm going to ignore it and keep taking Pepto-Bismol or something like that. So it's like, let the child have a teaching for you, let the student have a teaching for you, let the teacher learn something, let the parent learn something. Who cares? As long as the information that's good gets to where it needs to go, then that's good. And that's, for me, what awareness is all about. It works in relationships. If I've got a good idea about what needs to be different in here, I can present an idea that might be good, right? And then allow you to, and then you'll receive it and, play with it. Again, no obligation created, no deficit created, so there's no psychological incentive to reject it. It's just, drop it there and I'll pick it up later and see what I think about it, And vice versa, if you've got an idea, it's a shame when an idea that could improve your life comes in here. This is just where it lands. From all the places, it just lands in here for whatever reason, right? And because of interpersonal formalities, because we don't have good diplomatic relations in the personal growth department, that idea is blocked from going from here to here, right? And in the same way, sometimes it happens within one person, right? That their intellectual self is super into something, but they're what people call the inner child, or their visceral self, their gut self, their emotional self, whatever. It's like, listen, that intellectual guy is kind of an asshole. We don't want to learn anything from him. He's a jerk. He steamrolls. If you let him have an inch, he takes a mile. He'll take over everything. And so it's building an environment of trust, because trust is conducive to the free flow of potentially useful ideas, which is conducive for the improvement of, you're an information system. And if you want your experience of existing as an information system to be as good as it possibly can be, what you want is potentially important information to flow from one point of the system to another with a minimum of friction. And that's literally all awareness is about. That's what Awareness School is all about. If you want to change a lot, make a change pleasurable instead of painful. If you want to learn a lot, make learning pleasurable instead of painful. Well, how do you do that? Well, figure out what you do now to make change and learning painful, and pretty much mirror image it, and it's just pretty much 10 weeks of that.
Yes. So friends, with that, we invite you again to join us for Awareness School. Starts a week from tonight. It's going to be super fun. And if you have questions, let us know. And we'll see you again next time. Bye.
See ya.